Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel with the Progressive Change Campaign Committee. I see folks, I hope everyone's doing well, staying healthy, safe, positive, you and your families. I see folks that have been here on every one of these calls and new folks joining us. So if you'll remember, last week we had J.D. Schulten with us. He's a former baseball player. So he inspired us to think of something. So we developed our Batting for 1,000 Club for folks that are joining us, have been with us from the beginning and have joined us for every one of these calls. So I see we have Richard Master here from the Patriotic Millionaires, Kate and Phil Villers, Robert Frame and Scott Walker. I see folks from our three-timer call club, folks who have been on 3 Meet the Candidate calls, Morris Pearl, head of the Patriotic Millionaires, Woody Kaplan and Mary Grayson, and Dr. Jerry Bricks and Robert Neal, and a ton more friends. We have new friends joining us for the first time, Kari McClelland. So to all of you, thank you so much for being here. We are so excited to have Stephen Smith, powerhouse, popular progressive running to defeat Governor Jim Justice of West Virginia. Before I turn it over to our co-founder, Dr. Stephanie Taylor, let me just take a minute to share a few programmatic notes. So we really want this call to be interactive with everyone. We want to see everyone's faces. I think we're all craving as much engagement as we can. So if you're comfortable with it, if it's not already on, please turn your cameras on. When you're ready to ask your question, feel free to chat me your question at any point. You will find the chat icon in the middle of your screen and just find my name, Rachel, PCC host, and you will send me your question. And please feel free just to send that at any point. So before we dig into the Q&A session, we have a local activist here with us that's going to share a little bit why she supports Stephen. She was a leader in the teacher strike, so she'll share briefly a few words with us as well. So one final note, we'll also be recording this, so if you have to jump off in the middle or you're joining us a little bit late, no worries. We will send you the recording to watch at your convenience later. Please bear with me. I'm going to try and get through all of your questions. We know you're eager to ask them, and Stephen is equally eager to answer them. So one final note, while these events don't cost anything, we do hope that if you feel excited and motivated by what you hear from Stephen tonight, that you'll consider chipping into his campaign. Every dollar counts and will be maximized. So if that's something you would consider, we would deeply appreciate that. So we'll make that super easy for you. We'll stick it in the chat box a few times throughout this event. So please consider that if you can. Thank you. So with that, let me go ahead and turn it over to our co-founder, Dr. Stephanie Taylor. Stephanie?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Rachel. Thanks for joining our call tonight. And as Rachel said, to those who are now making this a fun, weekly, regular occurrence, it's really nice to see all of you again. I am so excited tonight that we are going to be joined by Stephen Smith, who is running for West Virginia governor. Stephen is a native of West Virginia. He spent 6 years running a community organization that's helped pass over 24 pieces of legislation, doing everything from increasing by about 180,000 people access to health insurance in the state of West Virginia to increasing by about 5 million the number of school breakfasts being served. They have real, tangible, concrete victories under their belts. And he was also very involved in the West Virginia teacher strikes, which I'm sure we'll hear more about tonight. The exciting thing too about Stephen is that he's not just running for governor, he is also building a bench. He's building a slate. He's recruited and trained about 90 candidates who are running as not for sale candidates in West Virginia. So he's building a movement behind him through his campaign as he runs for West Virginia governor. And I also want to say a word about the current governor of West Virginia. He is a cartoonishly bad Republican, a coal mine billionaire named Jim Justice, who's been fined millions of dollars for safety violations at his mines. And the contrast in this race really could not be greater. And as a former labor organizer and someone whose heart lies in West Virginia and the West Virginia labor movement, you know, one of the things that Stephen And the folks who are running with him have done is bring back the rednecks, the red bandanas that were the symbol of West Virginia miners in their labor struggles. And to me, that means a lot to me in a very emotional level. And again, as someone who was a union organizer in Appalachia for a long time, I have insisted to anyone who will listen that progressives can win West Virginia, can win statewide with a strong economic populist message. And I think that Stephen Smith is really showing us that it can be done. He is creating the model and he's paving the way. So this is an incredibly exciting and important race. And with that said, we are so excited to introduce and meet Stephen Smith.
Well, good evening, everyone. With that introduction, I'm just going to pass, and whatever you guys want to go from here. That was incredibly generous, Stephanie. Thank you so much. I am coming to you live from my basement in Charleston, West Virginia, where I was born and raised. I learned from my folks at a young age what I think most of us who grow up in West Virginia learn, which is that at our best, here in West Virginia, we judge ourselves more by the people we serve than by the things that we own. For me as a kid, that meant watching my dad help start the West Virginia Coalition for the Homeless, watching both of my parents foster kids and take care of neighborhood kids. It got to the point in my house growing up where the local elementary school would literally just send its most troubled children to our house as an after-school program. That's the kind of family I grew up in. I graduated from Harvard. I moved to Chicago where I met my wife. I spent the last 20 years of my career in public service working on the side of immigrants and working class people. And for most of the last 8 years, ran this anti-poverty organization in West Virginia that on the one hand won these big, bold victories. And on the other hand, it was just obvious to us that the people we were bringing up to the Capitol, the people we were organizing in communities, were 10 times smarter and more compassionate and more courageous than the corporate lobbyists who actually run the government of West Virginia. And that's what brings us to our campaign. I'm incredibly proud, more so than what we're doing in the governor's race, what we're doing to change politics fundamentally in West Virginia and to try to create a model for the rest of the country, especially so-called red states. The American Prospect just called our race the most important election in the country in 2020 because of this model. So I'm going to describe it very briefly, and then I'm going to tell you where your money goes if you make a donation tonight. Very briefly, what it looks like is, of course, we don't take corporate PAC money. We don't take money from pharmaceutical companies or big energy companies that have gotten rich off of exploiting our people and our land. Instead, though, we've had to build an entirely new fundraising infrastructure in West Virginia politics. We actually have already, right? The primary is 3 weeks away. We've already raised more individual donations than anybody who's ever run for governor in West Virginia history. Second, we went out and built volunteer teams. We actually launched the campaign almost 2 years ago and built volunteer teams in every county, all 55, in every constituency. So veterans organizing veterans, seniors organizing seniors, students organizing students, and none of those teams has anybody's name on it, so that they're built to last. It's not Veterans for Stephen Smith, it's Veterans Can't Wait. Our movement is called West Virginia Can't Wait. Even my campaign webpage is wvcan'twait.com. And then finally, we knew that one governor wasn't enough, that we needed people running up and down the ballot, inspired by the teacher strike in 2018. And so we started at all of our town halls, of which we have had 197 across West Virginia in person, and nearly 100 more since the pandemic hit online. We built our policy platform from the bottom up, and at every one of those town halls, we also encourage people to run for office. And we thought, if we could find 15 or 20 people to run with us, also not taking corporate PAC money, also running unapologetically pro-labor campaigns, that would be a miracle. And here we are, 18 months later. There are 94 of us, 93 candidates plus me, who have signed this West Virginia Can't Wait pledge. And what that means is that we're able to actually do politics in a different way. We don't have to build something off of a single personality. And that's where your money comes in. If you make a donation tonight to our campaign, that dollar will multiply. That a $1,000 donation tonight, for instance, would allow us to put 1,900 postcards in the hands of our volunteers. They will handwrite those messages to neighbors that they have been cultivating relationships with over the last 18 months. On that postcard, they'll be encouraged to vote for me. They'll be sent to a website that lets people know about all 94 candidates and how to search them by zip code. And most importantly, they'll be encouraged to check out our website, where there are ongoing and updated coronavirus resources, that we've essentially turned our field operation into a COVID response team that is in weekly contact with 37,000 plus West Virginians who might not have anybody else checking in on them. With that, I will stop from there, and I'm excited to get to Q&A. Thank you again for having me and for making time to learn more about West Virginia.
Thank you, Stephen. So before we dig into your questions, folks, please go ahead. We have great questions rolling in. Let's keep them going. Just chat me your question, Rachel, PCC host. Before we dig into those, we're going to hear from Brittany Bartlett. She was a leader in the teacher strike that Stephen mentioned, and we're going to hear briefly from her. Brittany, the floor is yours.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Brittany Bartlett. I'm also a candidate. I'm running for the West Virginia House of Delegates. I'm also one of those 94 candidates who signed the West Virginia Can't Wait pledge designed by Stephen's campaign. This pledge means that, we won't take corporate PAC money, that we won't back down from a debate, unapologetically pro-labor, and will never punch down. It's definitely been the easiest pledge I've ever signed. But before I became a candidate, I became a teacher. And I became a teacher in a state that underfunds, disrespects, and dismisses education. And so in 2018, after dealing with that, all 55 counties in West Virginia went on strike for 9 days, actually after a wildcat move before the unions moved. And I learned firsthand how absolutely corrupt our political system is at the state level. But I also learned what the right kind of political power can do, the kind of power where we united over a single cause and, disrupted the state for the good of the whole. And we really inspired a nation, and schools went on strike across the world, actually, which was really amazing. Stephen helped raise $300,000 for educators during that time. He stood with us. He came to public hearings and spoke for us. And he cites our strike as the inspiration for his run, but he's also been more of an inspiration to me and other candidates than he will ever know. And he's really bad at taking compliments, so I know he's struggling right now. But I am a better person, and West Virginia is a better state because of his leadership and his vision. Together, 94 of us have pledged to change the face of West Virginia politics, and West Virginia will prove to be an example of what a people-funded, people-fueled, people-focused movement can be. We are going to create a government of, by, and for the people. But we owe it all to Stephen for taking up the mantle and moving us forward together. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Brittany. Appreciate you offering up a more on-the-ground local perspective. All right, folks, so let's dig into your questions. First up, I have a question. Stephen, we have a question from David Shreve. He has a question on fiscal policy. David, sir, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. David, what's your question?
David, I think you might be muted still.
David? David, can you hear us?
I can't.
Oh, there you go. What's your question, sir?
I just unmuted myself. Given that the big distinction between states is not how they prioritize their funding, but often how they raise revenue. And also, successful revenue raising or reform packages happen very early in a new governor's term. I was wondering if you've got plans, even in a general, for hitting the road as soon as you can.
Yeah, what a great question. So folks, I would encourage people to look at wvcan'twait.com, taking a page from President Warren, or almost President Warren's campaign, we thought it was really important to build clear, distinct, detailed plans, put them out, and show how we're going to pay for them. And those plans were literally written by the people of West Virginia at 197 town halls and through a whole convention process where our volunteers came together and ratified it. And one of the things we found is that people had appetite for going and raising revenue as long as it didn't come from poor and working people. A very, very brief primer on the economy of West Virginia is this. In West Virginia, the people who have the most pay the least, and the people who have the least pay the most. This is true of corporate net income taxes versus small business taxes. It's true of out-of-state landholders versus small property owners. It's true of the individual tax rates. Jim Justice, our billionaire governor, the richest man in West Virginia, pays an effective tax rate of about 4%. My family and most families in West Virginia pay an effective tax rate of more like 8.5%. So what we have are actually about a half dozen major tax reforms that you can find in our plans to shift this back into balance. So there's a Homestead Act that raises the excess acreage fee, essentially property taxes, on out-of-state landholding companies. There's a reorganization of the individual tax rate and the income tax to sort of create a more fair, progressive tax in individual taxes. Very importantly, there's an increase in the severance tax in West Virginia on coal and natural gas to fund a massive infrastructure program to create short-term jobs rebuilding our infrastructure and long-term jobs in green energy. We also have measures around full cannabis legalization, and as best we can tell, the only proposed wealth tax in the country in this election cycle at the state level. I'm happy to get more into the weeds on any of those, but I also want to make sure we've got time for questions. So thank you. It's a great question.
Okay, perfect. Up next, we have Monty Allen. Monty has a question on energy. I'm going to go ahead and ask you to mute yourself, Monty. And what's your question?
Well, I think our country owes West Virginia a debt of gratitude for being the energy provider for our country during the early developmental stages. And West Virginia can take pride in that history. But coal is not the way we want to go. But on the other hand, I think West Virginia could once again reclaim its role as major energy provider for our country and take pride in that. And what I have in mind and wanted your reaction to is the notion of wind energy. The time I've been in West Virginia, brief visit, what I noticed was that there are ridge after ridge, the Appalachians running north to south, and the prevailing winds are coming west to east. And it's topographically perfectly set up to catch those prevailing winds. And so I wanted to find out, or I wanted to ask you, Susan, if this is a viable idea and if the people of West Virginia would be open to this, and if you see it as a possible way for West Virginia to once again become a major energy provider for our country.
We do, is the short answer. The longer answer is that there's an interesting thing about West Virginia politics that I think the debate has been pitched, and I think you didn't do this, which I appreciate, but the debate has been pitched as you're either pro-coal or anti-coal. And in West Virginia, our history tells us that the real fight in West Virginia is and always has been coal operators and coal miners. And that choosing the side of coal miners in West Virginia doesn't mean having a coal economy for the next 3 or 4 years until it runs out. It means putting pressure on those coal operators and executives to leave as much of that wealth here in West Virginia. Same with natural gas. Keep as much of that wealth here so that we can build an energy economy, as you say, that could last the next 100 years. We agree that we're well positioned to do so. And I think something that might offer some hope for people who are perhaps watching this and thinking that this could never work in West Virginia, we launched our campaign in a mine worker union hall that some of the strongest environmentalists in our campaign are coal miners, that there's a myth about coal miners as a political force that somehow they don't want safe land and water. In fact, environmental issues are actually quite popular in West Virginia. 77% of West Virginians favor an increase in the severance tax on coal and natural gas. The most popular issue by one poll in the whole state of West Virginia is water quality. The people of West Virginia are environmentalists, and the problem is that our politicians aren't, that the leadership of both parties for too long has been enthralled to these industries, but that the people are actually with us. So the short answer is yes. Folks can take a look at our Protect Land and Water Plan for an in-depth look at how we raise the funds and finance this kind of activity over the next decade. Great question.
All right, Stephen, thank you. Up next, we have Miss Linda Bergen in the DC suburbs. Linda, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Linda, what's your question for Stephen?
Well, my question is, I live in the Washington, D.C. suburbs, but I've been in West Virginia and I've worked in West Virginia for an exchange program, so I'm fairly familiar with the state. And I was interested in what you had to say, and I want to know if you can tell me why you think I should support you and give you dollars, besides the fact that you're a capable candidate and well experienced, and obviously West Virginia needs good leadership. Can you explain maybe the relationship you think you could develop between West Virginia and Maryland, particularly the western part of our state, which is so borders right on you? So that was my question.
That's a great question. One reason to give is that we can actually win. And when we win, it's the kind of shockwave that will go throughout the entire country. We've actually already been in touch with organizers and leaders and candidates in more than a dozen states, talking strategy about what we're doing here, how people can run these kinds of slates and efforts in other places. And so we think there's a multiplier effect investing in this race, that when we win, it becomes a real model of how to win in so-called red states, not by compromising on our values or pretending to be Republicans, but by sticking to who we are. So we think we can offer that to other places. With regard to Maryland in particular, Appalachia is a region of the country that is usually at best forgotten and at worst ridiculed, and that includes our neighbors. And there's another story to be told about our place, as I'm sure you can relate, one where we're #1 in the nation in the time we spend with our neighbors, top 5 in charitable giving, volunteer service, that these places and this culture is actually worth preserving and building from, and could be a real model for the rest of rural America broadly and our neighbors. I think the last thing I'll just say is that this is darn close, this race. We are up by 3 percentage points in a primary against candidates that are very nice human beings who can't win in a general because they're going to run traditional Democratic campaigns that have just gotten kicked in the teeth for the last 6-8 years. So we need to get out of the primary. And then in the general, the latest poll that we've seen from not even our camp has us winning against the governor. This is a real opportunity to do something that could send this, as I said before, a shockwave through the state and throughout the country. And I'll add this one thing. For anyone who's on the call who wants to continue the conversation, one thing I always do, including in last night's televised debate here in West Virginia, is give out my cell phone. So here it is, 304-610-6512. If you don't get your question answered in the next 30 minutes, please don't hesitate to follow up with me personally, and happy to get further in the weeds.
And folks, I will go ahead, if you didn't catch that, I will go ahead and I will, since Stephen's saying it's okay, I will send that to all of you as well in case we don't get to your question. Stephen promises he will get to it. So
yes,
up next,
email too, Rachel, if you don't mind.
Definitely, I
email's
will.
even better.
All right, you've given me permission. I'm doing it. Okay, up next, we have a question from Mr. Robert Frame. Robert, sir, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. What's your question for Stephen, Robert?
Hey there, thanks. So there are some strong points to West Virginia law for LGBTQ+ people that I can think of. Same-sex adoptions are legal, or they were. Legal name change options are available for trans folks. But there's no statewide anti-discrimination protections for employment or housing, etc. I'm wondering, how are you strategizing with trans folks to follow their lead to improve West Virginia's lives? And what are your own ideas for what would be the key steps to take to prioritize should you be in that honeymoon period being able to get the most done?
Thank you so much for this question. So we think the most important thing underlying any the representation of any group in government is to actually fight for the representation of that group in government. So I'm proud of the fact that our 94 candidates are disproportionately people of color, disproportionately women, and disproportionately members of the LGBTQ+ community. In fact, if all 94 of us win, and not all of us are going to win, but if all 94 of us do, we will have elected the first 2 transgender, openly transgender politicians in West Virginia history. So we think that's a big part of the puzzle. But we also think it's important to run an unapologetic policy campaign around the issues of marginalized people because it's the right thing to do, and because that's the only way any of us win anything bold is if we fight for all of us. So you mentioned a couple of things. I would add to the list, West Virginia has not yet banned conversion therapy and should. West Virginia has no policy in place to sort of encourage people's, the use of people's names, right? There's a lot of dead naming in West Virginia. And also the just access to rural healthcare, as you can imagine, is brutal in West Virginia, and it's almost non-existent for transgender folks. And in fact, we've focused on this, told a couple of these stories on our Facebook page of trans folks, leaders in our campaign, who are traveling 3, 4, 5 hours out of state in order to just see a doctor that is willing to see them and provides decent care. Those are things that aren't complicated to fix if there is political will. There has just been zero political will for a long time. And I'm proud of the fact that our policy platform, that populist policy platform, includes all of these things in black and white.
Okay, thank you. Up next, we have Mary Geisman, my friend from many, many, many years ago when I first started out at a progressive think tank in DC. So glad to see you here, Mary. I'm gonna go ahead and unmute you. Mary, what's your question for Stephen?
Okay, what is your relationship with the Democratic senator from West Virginia?
That's a great question, Mary. I especially appreciate your chuckle at the end of it. So our relationship with the Democratic senator from West Virginia is complicated. As the leader of an anti-poverty organization for the last 8 years, there were moments where we worked very closely with Senator Manchin, and our organization was the lead organization in moving him to be a major and significant public supporter of the Affordable Care Act. Some of you may remember that he was originally planning to vote with Republicans and helped stave off the evisceration of the ACA a few years ago, and our organization worked very closely to bring him to that point and held 500 people town halls around the state where folks told their stories. So there have been moments where we've worked very closely together. There have been moments where we've been on opposite sides, where our organization previously and in our campaign has butted heads. And in the primary, you probably won't be surprised to hear that the senator is backing one of our opponents. And still, in spite of the support of Senator Manchin and other members of the political establishment and a whole truckload of money, we are currently leading in the polls because of the political machine we've built from the bottom up. And frankly, as I sort of alluded to before, this is the only way any Democrat's going to win over the next 20 years. That as the Democratic Party of West Virginia has become more conservative and more pro-corporate over the last 20 years, it has also fallen apart. The Democratic Party was dominant in West Virginia for 80 years until 2014. And the lesson to learn is that if we're going to get back to dominance, we're going to have to bring all of these people back into the process, folks who have been left behind by the Democratic Party. And that's what we're doing, something that we think will help get us elected, but will also help a whole bunch of other down ballot Democrats. And our hope and expectation is that when we win the primary, we'll be able to, as best as we can, unify those factions within the party.
Great, thank you, Stephen. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Phil Greenleaf has a question for you. Phil, what's your question for Stephen?
Hello, Stephen. As soon as I found out you were running in West Virginia, I got excited because I'm an activist all my life, and I've been studying the life and all the speeches of Mother Joe. And I'm this section on West Virginia and what was going on there between 1919 and 1925, the whole story of labor organizing and the miners and the, you know, what happened to the miners and who stood up for who. So I'm wondering if there's anything in your campaign that's going to somehow pay tribute and honor the life, the work, the organizing of Mother Jones. Some people in our country don't even know who she was, except they know there's a magazine called Mother Jones. Well, her life story, I just assume that all progressives of West Virginia know her legacy in West Virginia. It's so important.
No.
So I don't know if you have a Mother Jones brigade or a Mother Jones street theater group or a song.
Yes, what a beautiful question. Thank you for stirring this up. So our campaign launched 18 months ago in Matewan because of the history of the mine wars. For folks who might be watching and don't know this history, the bloodiest labor conflict in American history happened in the hills of West Virginia when Black, white, and immigrant mine workers came together, often not even speaking the same language, and fought against not just coal operators and Baldwin Felts agents and bought off local sheriffs. Even the federal government was called in on behalf of the coal companies to drop bombs on striking miners. And at the heart of that work was the UMWA and Mother Jones and Bill Blizzard and Sid Hatfield and all of these heroes of West Virginia labor history. And it's this part of our history that purposefully gets untold, right? Because what it reminds us is that when we come together, Black, white, immigrant, from all different parts of the state, when we come together as working people, there's nothing we can't achieve. And so it's been whitewashed out of a lot of the history books of West Virginia. And that's why it was so important for us to launch the campaign from West Virginia, from the town where the mine wars began, Matewan, West Virginia, in a UMWA, United Mine Workers of America local union hall, all of us wearing red bandanas. That's the way we pay tribute, to answer your question. And for folks who are interested, there's a really beautiful short film, 3.5 minutes, about the launch of the campaign and about that history. Maybe Rachel can even find it online and throw it into the chat. But it's a really beautiful piece done by a local coal miner turned filmmaker here in West Virginia. So we're very much aware of that history and proud of it. Thank you for raising that question.
Thank you. So folks, what a wonderful question and thoughts from Stephen to move toward wrapping up on. So thank you so much for those thoughtful questions. Please forgive me if I didn't get to yours. Like I said, I owe you all a bunch of things. I will send you Stephen's cell, his email, and that video as well, so that you'll have that in your inbox shortly, and we will get you your question answered if I didn't hear tonight. So we are going to move toward wrapping up. We want to be respectful of everyone's time. So let me go ahead and kick it back over to Stephanie for her final thoughts. Stephanie?
So I'm sorry to do this. I have to share one more fact about that labor fight in West Virginia in the 1920s. That was the only, Stephen mentioned that the military was dropping bombs on the miners. That was the only time in American history the Air Force has ever been used against American citizens to break the miner strike that was happening there. I'm so glad that we've gotten to pay tribute to that fight during this call. Just another reason why Stephen's campaign is so transformational. He's connecting his campaign with our history in, I think, a very, very important way. Thank you to everyone who has been asking such engaging questions on this call. Thank you, Stephen, for answering them. And also thank you to Brittany Bartlett for joining us, and good luck to Brittany in her race as well. And we're really excited to see the results. And thank you for spending your time with us as well. As always, if you feel moved to chip in, please do so. And I hope that folks on this call really recognize that this is an incredibly transformational and exciting race. And we really can show that economic populism can win in West Virginia. And in rural states. So thank you again.
Thanks, Stephanie. Stephen, are there a few final thoughts that you would like to leave folks with?
Yeah, anytime you give a politician a chance to talk, they're going to take it. I'll end with this. I mean, this is a strange time and a brutal time, especially in places like West Virginia that already had healthcare systems and unemployment offices that weren't doing their job. It has just gotten worse. So as you're deciding where to send your money, I know it's going a lot of places and a lot of good causes. I think there is something special happening here, and it's a way, and the model we're building is a way to help the people of West Virginia, whether or not I win. If we win this race, all of a sudden there is a blueprint, right? All of a sudden, no one ever has to argue that it's possible to win this kind of race in this kind of state. But even more important than that, whether we win or lose, if you're able to make a donation tonight, literally, we're going to take the donations from this evening, and whatever that bundle is, we're going to make one last purchase of postcards. You can chip in $1,000, chip in 1,000. You can chip in 100, chip in 100. The max is 2,800. Multiply that number by 2, and we will send that many postcards, handwritten by a volunteer, with my cell phone number on it, information about how people can find all the candidates, including Brittany and the 92 others of us. And it will be an offer of help, that our volunteers are on the phones every single day, helping people get connected to food, unemployment benefits, et cetera. That we take it very seriously, that we have 2 responsibilities now, not just to win a people's government in West Virginia, but also to do everything we can to reduce the suffering of West Virginians in this moment. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call. Email is even better, stephen@wvcan'twait.com. I look forward to hearing from you, and thank you again for having an interest in places like West Virginia. Almost everything you've heard about our state is wrong, and it's exciting to be on calls like this where people are genuinely curious about our place rather than writing it off. So thank you again. And thanks to PCCC. This is, as I mentioned to them beforehand, of all of our partnerships at the national level, none of our partners have stood up like this to help in this kind of way, which is a huge help. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Folks, but biggest thanks goes out to you. Thank you for, whether it was your first time or you've been with us from the very beginning, thank you for taking the time to be with us. So please keep an eye for a follow-up note from me with the things that I owe you, Stephen's email, his cell, and a few other details, that great video he mentioned. And then please keep your eyes open for an invite for the next Meet the Candidates Zoom event in the series. So with that, thank you very much for being with us. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay positive, and until the next time, thank you, folks. Have a good night. Bye.